This is Groundeffected. My name could be Steve, but it's actually not, it's Brent, and welcome to Climbing into Bed with Toast. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I painted my little blue man from this game. After trying 10 different ways of painting him, I finally figured out the right way to do it. At least the way I like it the most. Now before we carry on with the video, I must make a huge shout out to El Miniaturista, but it's because of one thing that I saw in this guy's video that changed everything for my entire outlook on painting these little spacemen. So I will leave a link for his Instagram and his YouTube in the description below. Make sure to go give him some love. The dude is a champion. He paints much better than me, so you should probably go follow him anyway. Now, one of the things that made me want to go through this entire process of painting so many different little men that are all identical to each other was because I wanted to find out the correct recipe for painting that blue suit that they wear. And I did not like the offerings that Games Workshop was telling me how to paint their suits. So I went on a mission and I painted every kind of underpainting you could ever think of. I tried silver undercoats, I tried silver zenithals, I tried zenithal, I tried volumetric lighting, I tried volumetric lighting with silver paints, I tried it with white, with grey, with blue, with light blue. I tried it with everything. I even stippled a volumetric lighting base on, and I didn't like anything that I did. The main reason I didn't like anything I did was because my wash was in the wrong place. Hopefully you can take some of this information in this video and apply it to larger models as well as other kind of paintings that you may be doing, even if they're miniatures or large statues that I usually paint. I have definitely waffled way too much, so let's just get into the video and I'll show you exactly how I did it. So as per usual, I start off this model with a black primer base coat. That is my primer and my base coat all in one. I'm going to use an ink to create a volumetric light. Volumetric light is pretty much what it says on the tin. Basically, you go around the model and I highlight everywhere the light would hit. This is different to a zenithal. A zenithal mainly comes from the top only. Volumetric light is something different. You're going to go over each ball, tube, shape, everything that is on the model. You're going to go over it and highlight that part specifically. By doing this, you're creating a lot of contrast and depth before you've even started the piece. I usually use this when I'm doing a zenithal in general. I technically do more of a volumetric lighting, probably the lazy way. It's kind of like a zenithal with a bit of volumetric light added to it. Basically, just go through the model and add some highlights to each individual part of the model. Think about the arms, think about the shoulders, think about the head, think about the backpack, think about the back of the legs. Anywhere you think light would hit, you need to make it white. Try to keep a lot of black when you do this process. And this next step is something I almost wanted to kick myself for. I had been applying my washes after I'd painted the blue coats, and this was causing a lot of problems for me in the fact that it looked so dirty and I couldn't handle how it was looking, no matter how tidy I did the wash. And after watching El Miniaturista's video, I saw that he had put the wash on before he put the blue, which blew my mind. And so I'm going to apply the wash. In order to create this wash, what I'm going to use is just plain oil paint that you can buy from the general art store. I use Winsor & Newton, the Winton version. I don't think it's the best one for this, but it does work. I mix that with a white spirit until it falls off the sides of the cup that I'm mixing it in. When it starts to flow a lot easier, I know it's ready to use. And what I'm going to do is go through the model and pretty much just place my brush in the darker recessed areas and allow the wash to just seep out, and it draws its way through. An oil wash is going to move so much better than any acrylic wash ever would, and it is so much easier to get it into the cracks and crevices and essentially panel line everything that's there. If you have a large model and you want to do black lining into recessed areas of things, but you still want to keep some of that color on the front, then the best thing you can do is create an oil wash, because you can put that in place, and once it's all gone in and dried up, you can go back in with a white spirit and wipe out some of the highlighted areas. This will wipe off the oil wash but leave the acrylic paint behind, so the color that you had originally painted it would stay in place, and you wouldn't be destroying anything unless you started to rub it so hard that fire started coming out. A lot of the times people will put a clear coat over their zenithal or their volumetric lighting before the oil wash stage, and I feel like that's probably a good shout. If you are going to do this, it's your first time doing it, put a clear coat on and then do your oil washes. This will save you from having a bad time. For the main blue on the body, I'm going to use Azure Blue, and this is a contrast paint from Games Workshop. I'm going to spray this through my airbrush. I have thinned it down just a little bit with water, just so that it's not so thick, and it goes on very smoothly and super easy, especially over that white that you laid down as a good base for it to lay on. I'm going to apply this only to the areas that are lighted with the volumetric lighting. This is going to make the highlight color be that super bright blue that I exactly want from the light hitting the spaceman's armor. Now for the shadows, I'm going to use an ink. In hindsight, I don't think I would use this Winsor & Newton ink. Realistically, getting a Liquitex would probably be a lot better for you, but it still does work pretty well. And essentially, I started out with the ultramarine. Funny it's called that considering what I'm painting. But anyway, I started out with the ultramarine blue from Winsor & Newton. I didn't like the color this had, and I moved over to the Azure Blue, which is a game ink from Vallejo. I sprayed this into all the shadowed areas and all the areas that were left black. It doesn't cover the black, but what it does do is it creates a smooth blend between the black and the next highlighted blue. It also tints the black a little bit blue so that it kind of looks like a dark blue and gives great contrast to the model. Next thing I'm going to do is go over the gun and I'm going to paint it matte black. This is because I don't want to have a blue gun, so I'm going to paint it matte black and set this up for a dry brushing later on. Now I'm at the stage where I can start adding transfers and decals onto this model. I'm going to start out by adding the symbols on the shoulders and the little things that go in his kneecap and all that kind of stuff. In order to put this stuff on, what I'm going to use is Decal Set. Smells like friggin' vinegar. I don't know what it actually is. It stinks like hell, but I use this stuff underneath the decal before I put it on, and it softens the decal and it kind of breaks down the surface of the decal a little bit, and I use an earbud to press over parts. This makes it so that you can place decals even on curved objects. You may have struggled in the past to put a decal on something. If you've ever tried that and it's never worked, trust me, just buy a Decal Set or some kind of version of something similar to it, and you will be placing decals on everything you've ever seen. You can put it on round surfaces, you can put it on curved surfaces, around corners, up the edge of things. It's perfect. This stuff makes putting decals on so much easier. Just buy it and thank me later. It will last forever. Now to add some little bit of extra highlight to the model, I'm going to mix sky blue and highlight skin together. I'm mostly going to be using the highlight skin, but I want to slightly tint the white so it's not completely white, but it is got like a slight bluish tint to it, but still be quite a light color. It shouldn't be light blue, it should be more white with a touch of blue in it. And this is going to create a very sharp edge on all the crisp, hard, sharp edges around the model. I'm not going to do like Games Workshop does and paint every single sharp edge that ever existed. All I'm going to do is focus on the ones that would be catching the light. These are the ones that are facing upright. These are the ones that are on the tips of the highlights of my volumetric lighting as well. It's not just all over the place. All over the place just looks ridiculous, and I don't like that at all. A big tip for doing edge highlights like this, if you want to know, the best thing to do is use some water. Make sure that your paint is going to flow very well. Use a really sharp brush and try to just use the edge of it. Another good tip is to keep a clean brush next to you so that if you do make a mistake, you can dip it in water and instantly rub off that mistake and not have any tears from painting through the middle of a leg that you now have to repaint the whole model to fix. And as you can see, I'm just going through the model and I'm placing these highlights in areas where I think the light is going to hit. It's not going to be all over the place. It's just pretty much the predominant areas that light would be hitting the edge of this armor. The way I see these Space Marines is that they're not made of satin matte paint. They're made of metal, so they're supposed to shine. I don't understand why Games Workshop tells you to put a metallic paint on their shoulder pad things, but they don't tell you to put a metallic paint on the actual Space Marine. That just doesn't make sense to me. For the base, I'm going to be using Martian Iron Crust. It's a reddish kind of color, and essentially what this is a technical paint that basically is just paint with sand in it. And what happens is it builds up and it creates a nice crusty, rocky kind of looking texture on the base, and you can then put a wash into that and you can use that as a really cool looking texture on your base. In order to create a little bit more life in my marine, I'm going to actually use my airbrush and spray off some of the paint from the bristles of my brush onto his shins and the back of his legs. This is going to make it look like the dust has jumped up and bits of dirt have gotten all over his feet and legs. At this point, I'm going to start going in and doing a couple of little details. Nothing too crazy, but I want to start highlighting certain things. On his backpack, he's got a couple of little bolts and rivets and things. I'm going to use an aluminium to highlight those. There's a couple of little, I don't know what any of these things are, but there's a couple of little things around him, and since he's probably a robot type man, they've got to have LEDs and lights and stuff, so I'm going to use red to light up some of these things and make it look like they may be lights or something that are on his body. For his eyes, I'm going to paint them solid red, and I'm going to put a little dot in the corner of each eye just to create a highlight so that it looks like his lenses have some nice color to them. I'm going to use pouch color to paint all of his pouches, and that essentially is just brown. It doesn't really matter what brown you use here. You can use any brown you like. I like quite a reddish brown just to get a good decent leatherish looking base coat for it. Now to start work on the gold sections on this model. I'm going to start out with bronze because I'm going to use this as my base color. I'm going to build up to a much brighter color after that, but also this bronze covers like nothing has ever covered in its life before. So this is going to make my job easier. I'm going to be able to paint it down and work on top of that, and it's going to be so much easier than trying to paint gold that just doesn't want to go onto a model. I'm going to paint a base coat over the things on his pauldrons, the little trimming around the outside of it, and I'm also going to paint that on the aquila on his chest. Whilst that's drying, I'm going to take that aluminium that I placed down and gently dry brush that all over the gun. I'm not going to place too much attention on the gun because my main focus at this point is actually just the suit, and I want to just try get that right first. Then taking some of that aluminium, I'm going to go through and paint the little fart vents on the back of his backpack and a couple of little things here and there. Nothing too crazy, but just a few things. Now going back to the base, I'm going to use Reikland's Flesh Shade and I'm going to place that liberally all over this base now that it is dry. This pooling up is going to create a lot of texture on the base and it's going to look awesome later on. Now going back to those leather pouches, I'm going to use a slightly lighter earth tone and I'm just going to paint the edges of them and a couple lines here and there just to give them some interest. Back onto the pauldrons now that they've dried, and I'm going to use a rich gold and paint the highlighted areas in the corners of the pauldrons. I'm actually going to then put a bit of white into that, and I'm going to go right to the tips with white, and once I've done that, I'm going to go around the edges and edge highlight just the edge where the white is and slightly halfway through the pauldron itself. Now that we've got a super good base down, everything is looking good, it's time to put that perfect black rim around your base. If you don't paint your rim black, you're not even living anymore. You might as well throw your model in the bin because it doesn't look good. Also, it doesn't have to only be black, it can be any color, but just paint the freaking rim. Just to add a little bit of spice to this guy, I grabbed one of my Necrons that I had previously kind of half painted, and I chopped him into a bunch of pieces and stuck him to the base as if he had just died in battle. And then I called it done. Hopefully this video gave you some kind of information that may change your painting experience in the future for the better, and I hope it really does. And if you find it does, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. Of course, if you would like to support the channel, the best thing you can do is watch the next video. And if you feel like you want to support even more than that, then I would like you to check in the description for the Patreon. In the Patreon, you get nothing, but you do get access to our private Discord, and in the private Discord we are always talking different techniques, different this, different printing, different that, all the things that you would want to be talking about if you are interested in 3D printing and painting statues and models and miniatures. Now of course I cannot talk about the Patreon without thanking the latest Patreons we got this week, and those are Mac, Alfred Chu, Lawrence Nidges, Vermilion Hugh, Antonio, Resin Freak, and last, thank you dudes so much for your support. It really means the world to me. It helps keep the lights blind in my eyeballs and this channel going. Of course, you need to share all this with your gran, because without your gran, we can't grow any bigger. Now that we've got to the end of the video, there is only one thing I have left to say. We all know it's coming. If you didn't like anything you saw in the video, just click dislike, find another video to watch, and f*** off. Holy crap, thank you so much, El Miniaturista. It was the best freaking thing I've ever seen, putting a wash under the color. Who thinks of that?